And now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's broadcast. We are joined today by Susan Osborne, Director of Advisory Services at Radius. Susan's expertise spans a wide range of areas, including extensive knowledge of international and U.S. federal tax, including both U.S. state income tax and sales tax and use tax, as well as accounting, HR, consulting, and compliance services. We also have Chris King with us today, the U.S. East Coast representative for the province of British Columbia. Chris provides hands-on, no-cost assistance to fast-growing U.S. companies, entrepreneurs, and investors that are considering setting up, expanding, or maintaining physical operations in British Columbia. He and his colleagues on the U.S. West Coast and in British Columbia work to connect startups, mid-cap, and large-cap corporations to the information and resources they need to locate or expand to British Columbia quickly and profitably while reducing operational risk. Finally, we have Jeff Christie from Boast Capital. Jeff is responsible for new client development, partnerships, and strategic growth for the Alberta and Prairie region at Boast Capital. Prior to joining Boast Capital, Jeff competed as an Olympic athlete for 16 years in the sport of luge. He raced in the 2006 and 2010 Winter Olympics, as well as 72 World Cups and 8 World Championships. Jeff holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the Royal Roads University in Victoria, British Columbia. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Ed. Principally, our webinar today is focused on the generous R&D tax credits provided by the Canadian government and the key considerations for doing business in Canada. But I thought it would be helpful just to give a high-level overview of the Canadian proposition and also to touch base very briefly on the proposition within British Columbia, the province that I represent. Also, as Ed mentioned, I'm based on the East Coast here in Boston, and I'm joined on the West Coast by 3 colleagues supporting investment into British Columbia. But we also work very closely with the U.S.-Canadian Consulate Network, who are an invaluable resource for you when you look across the whole of Canada. And for sure, I'll be able to connect interested participants to the consulate offices as needed. First off, why Canada? Canada today is one of the best countries in the G20 to do business, according to both Forbes and Bloomberg. And we're a country that has strong economic growth and, in fact, leading all G7 countries over the past 10 years. With a highly educated workforce, the most highly educated among the members of the OECD, and our overall marginal effective tax rate is by far the lowest of the G7, about 17 percentage points lower than the U.S. And for the 7th consecutive year, the World Economic Forum has declared Canada's banking system to be the soundest in the world. So a strong case for Canada. Next slide, please. Moving on to the province of British Columbia, we are proud to have among the lowest combined federal and provincial corporate tax rates in Canada and in the G7. We have strong connectivity with the Vancouver Airport, consistently ranked as North America's #1 airport, where we have among the most direct flights to Asia than any other airport in North America. We have an outstanding public transit system and one of the fastest broadband speeds in the world today. We also have the closest major port to Asia, which acts as a key international transportation hub. And we have some of the lowest energy rates in North America, with the vast majority of our energy primarily derived from clean energy. And this last point is critical to the recent success that we've seen in British Columbia, with global tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google, all setting up, and in some cases, significant operations in the last 18 months or so. Vancouver is one of the best cities in the world to recruit, to employ, and to redeploy business talent. And for those of you who have visited the province and Vancouver, you know that when we mention quality of life as a key driver for attracting companies and talent, we can actually back it up.
So just to quickly overview, we'll look at permanent establishment risk, entity structure, must-know rules, and Canadian corporate tax. Next slide. So as I noted, many clients inquire, if I have a permanent establishment, do I need an entity? And first, a company must consider their business activities that give rise to a physical presence that generates revenue in a country, which gives rise to a permanent establishment, which results in a tax reporting responsibility. I've summarized here some of the common items that give rise to permanent establishment, commonly called PE. operating at fixed place of business, employees with commission, the revenue-generating activities, conclusion of contracts in country, and also dependent agencies is something that companies need to consider when they believe they're working with independent contractors and they're actually de facto employees. The U.S.-Canada Treaty has deemed service provisions which differ from the OECD model, and the 2010 protocol was a major overhaul to the treaty, which brought in two bright line tests. The first being that if services are performed by an individual who's present in country for 183 days or more in a 12-month period, and the revenues are more than 50% of aggregated gross revenues of the enterprise, there'll be a permanent establishment in country. Or if the services are provided through one or more persons, not necessarily employees, where those persons are working in Canada for more than 183 days in the 12-month period through one or several connected projects, that will also establish bring in permanent establishment. And so just an item to be mindful of is if you don't have permanent establishment, that Canada has a 15% withholding requirement for any Canadian residents that make payments to non-residents for services performed in Canada. You would have to stake a claim ahead of time before that withholding to alleviate any withholding through Regulation 105 application. But there could be a tax return filing required if you need to seek a refund because the withholding has been made.